Hello, everyone. Welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival, episode 111. I'm Enigmaeus, and today we're starting a new build. We're making a hover miner. There, I said it. Quick and easy. You know what we're making, and we can spend a little bit of time talking about what this is going to involve and some of the things that I've done prior to this in preparation for this build. What I'm doing now is my pretty common approach to lifting the chassis off the ground after you place the core, the starter block, and that's place it on a large block, build out from it, and then build down to the ground, and then you can remove the block from underneath, and voila, your core is suspended whatever height above the ground you wanted it to be. The only thing is we have to be a little bit careful about this setup because things are touching the ground now that aren't generally the best suited for touching the ground. They're not landing pads or anything like that, so if the ship is going to start bouncing, it might just bounce off the planet. We'll have to wait and see. So being that this is a mining vessel, before I put all this effort into building something based on this concept or that concept, you can see this sled in the background there that's got the drills on it. That was my little test rig that I made to try a few different things. I did read up a little bit wiki-based knowledge related articles talking about the mechanics of the drill system. The thing with that sort of information this early in the game's development is that it tends to be more often than not only partially accurate. I don't want to say, that anything you read is most likely garbage at this stage of the game, but some people are in such a rush to explain what they know about something that they don't realize how much they don't know, and consequently the information that they provide isn't as accurate as you might like it to be. So it makes a certain amount of sense to have, read these things with a grain of salt, and by all means give people the benefit of the doubt. But then where there are any questions about such things, it makes sense that we test it ourselves. And one of the things primarily that I wanted to test was whether it was more efficient to have the drills spread out for maximum coverage, or if it made sense to have the drills overlapping a little bit to remove material faster. And there would be, I suspect, a purpose for either option, but it was more important to me that I know one way or the other what it is, as opposed to some sort of test that's going to define how I was going to build the best ever miner, which I'm predicting already this is not going to be. I think this is going to be a fun miner to build. I think it's going to be a fun ship to have, and I think it's going to be completely adequate at being a mining vessel, but the best miner ever is probably not the title that will be appended to this at any point in the future. So, getting back to the topic of which is better, spread out or overlapping, I actually created a little test area made up with 2 lanes, outlined with concrete, the large block concrete attached to the base, so that I could theoretically make the test rig with one configuration of drills and take it on a run and record it as I was doing so, and then get a different configuration of drills, put it in the other lane, and then record it doing whatever it was going to do as well. And then I would be able to place the videos side by side and see which one was faster, which one seemed to cover the most area. I mean, some of these questions, the answer would be obvious, and some of them might be a little bit surprising, but unfortunately, the one consistent element that we had with both setups was that hover vessels with drills on them are really, really difficult to keep going in a straight line. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to offer anything conclusive, which is why I'm not showing you guys, but there was information to suggest that having the drills overlap, like you see now, we had 2 together, and then we had basically 3 pairs of drills instead of 6 individual drills. That configuration with the paired drills seemed to be removing material faster than the wider setup, and the wider setup, of course, wasn't as fast moving forward, but was removing more material over time. As for the same amount of distance traveled, you would remove more material. So it was kind of a fun little experiment. And if you look really, really closely when we swing the camera around to see the landscape behind us, you'll actually see the holes in the ground that I dug with the drills when I was doing the testing. So, based on all of that, I've decided to go with the spread configuration to cover the maximum area with the drills that I have. And the other consideration that I had regarding the mounting of the drills specifically was I wanted to mount them in a way that they aren't protruding all the way out from the front of the ship. Like I didn't want a ship where all the drills are mounted on the front, so you have whatever is the front of the ship and then drills sticking 6 blocks ahead of that. I wanted to have them recessed in the chassis, so they were just sticking out 1 block from wherever they protruded from the ship, and just had this really subtle sort of drill presence as opposed to this dominant presence of these big stick-like drills sticking out of the front of the ship. The other thing that I wanted to do was have mining turrets on the ship, but have them positioned in a way that they could work seemingly alongside the drills. I don't even know it's possible to use both the drills and the turrets at the same time, but I wanted to have it set up in a way that looked like it was possible, even if it didn't work that way. So that's what you'll see eventually when we get around to placing them on the ship, is we're going to set them up so that they're recessed in the chassis near where the drills are covering, so that we've got that duplicate sort of coverage aspect to it. The last thing that I wanted to do with regards to this build is sort of like a key design element going into things, was I wanted to build it as close to an orb-like shape as I could. And this is the result of my findings when I was messing around with the little sled that I made, is that the ground becomes really uneven in the mining process, and it gets a little bit difficult to kind of move around. It's easy to get the ship wedged in particular areas, and you can recover from that fairly easily. I found that by having a little ship that was light and plenty of thrusters, I never had any difficulty getting myself out of a hole that I had dug, literally. But at the same time, I didn't want to put myself in a position where getting wedged into areas and having to jitter around and do all kinds of crazy stuff was the norm. So the idea is that by having this ship basically circular with drills that respect that shape, is that you can literally turn anywhere and the ship will fit one way and it'll fit 180 degrees the other way, and it'll fit 90 degrees the other way. You can do whatever you want. You can turn it however you want, and you'll be able to get into and out of whatever area that the ship has already been in, regardless of which direction you're facing. So that's kind of a tall order when we're talking about a ship that's the size of this one. I mean, what you see is what the ultimate final size of the ship is going to be, essentially. It's going to be filled out more, obviously, and it's going to look more complete. But we're not building anything off of this area that you see now. It's what you see is what you get. So I'm hopeful that this whole idea of having the rounded ship will make things a little bit more interesting, if not for benefits of the practical kind when you're mining and trying not to get stuck, at least for the amusement of having this really round sort of mining ship with all these drills barely sticking out of it, going in and wiggling around and gathering up all of the ores that you could ever possibly need. So that's basically the primary design considerations that I had going into this. As far as the interior of the ship goes, we're going to have lots of space for pretty much everything that we need. One thing, like I said, I learned with the sled is that it's good to have lots and lots of thrusters, because you want to be able to back out of this or slip sideways through that or do whatever. Maneuverability is key for these kinds of ships. So we're not going to go cheap on the thrusters. We're definitely going to provide plenty of those. Plenty of RCS units. A ship of this size should basically be able to turn on a dime, for lack of a better term. And, of course, enough storage capacity for the fuel to keep the thing going for extended mining trips. The things that we're going to be mining, we want to make sure they have a place to go without having to worry about overflows and stopping the mining process to move things from one container to the other. Just plenty of storage space for everything that we need. And then, of course, the basics for survival: a fridge, oxygen station, things like that. And I'm not concerned at all about whether or not we're going to have room for it in a ship of this size, because the interior is going to be way bigger than we actually need for any of that stuff. So the interior itself is probably going to be 2 tiers. And how we distribute things amongst those tiers is, at this point, I would say not really all that important, because it's, again, we're going to have lots of space. It's more or less going to be a subjective decision based on preference, as opposed to a decision based on necessity, that we have to do things a certain way or it's just not going to work. Now, in terms of the hover engines and such, this is something that came up and I probably talked about it since then, but I'm going to talk about it again just briefly, is there was the idea put forward that you had to plan the balance of a ship from the very beginning to make sure that it wouldn't tilt this way or tilt that. I've never had a problem with the ship tilting on its own, I guess you could say. I've always believed when we're talking about like hover engines, thrusters, stuff like that, there's no kill like overkill. I would rather have so many that it's ludicrous than have not enough and then later on feeling like we wish we had added more, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. One would think that beyond a certain period of time that I would learn moderation and spend a little bit of time trying to find the ideal balance between sufficient and not overabundant to the point of lunacy. But really, I don't care that much. I'm just going to build it the way I want to build it. But with regards to hover engines and building the ship for balance, and I don't think it's necessary. I've never seen anything to indicate that it's necessary. You've seen the Manta, my big yellow hover vessel. It likes to go flying off cliffs and stuff. It's just got so much thrust that it doesn't care what's going on. I never gave a moment's thought to the balance of the ship when I was placing the hover engines, aside from putting them underneath in a way that looked like they were distributed relatively equally across the complete underside of the ship. And that was all. That was the entire planning process for that part of the build. And it's going to be the same here when we get around to the placement of the hover engines. Is going to be, this is the area where we have room to place them, and we're going to place them in a way that's relatively equally distributed. And I don't expect there to be too many problems. If there are problems, by all means, I'll speak up and indicate what those problems are and how we solve them. I'm not really expecting there to be too much by way of problems. I've made too many hover vessels and not had problems up to this point. We don't need to assume the worst based on anecdotal evidence that isn't present. So here I'm just kind of reworking a part of the ship. I realized after I got all of the drills on that I had made the ship a little bit too small, a little bit too narrow in diameter, talking about putting things into circular shapes. I needed to add a block width on either side of the ship, or I guess a total of 2 blocks width in diameter to make things work out the way that I wanted them to. Which fortunately on a ship this size really doesn't take long to correct. Any mistakes that I make, and there's going to be several, any mistakes that I make on a ship of this size are really, really simple and straightforward to correct, even with mirror mode off, because you can see the entire ship from pretty much anywhere. It's very straightforward. There's not so many blocks involved that it takes a long time to change things. And really, it's just not a capital vessel. I mean, talking about going from a ship the size of the Saturnus to something like this, it's quite a jarring experience, but it's fun. It's fun to do the little things from time to time. So, the next episode we're going to continue with this. It's not going to be a long mini-series for this build because, again, it's not a large ship, but that doesn't mean that I'm just going to kind of rush it to try and get it into service and say it's done. I want to spend a little bit of time getting the aesthetics the way that I would like them to be, getting the interior set up in a way that I'm happy with. Like I say, that won't take long, but it's still going to be a component of the exercise, is getting the interior set up and then finishing the exterior so that it has all of the features that I want it to have on the outside of the ship in a way that kind of hopefully respects this concept of the orb-shaped vessel. So if you want to be notified about the next episode and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.